Why should I be a vegan?
I mean, it kind of depends on your own beliefs. I mean, you can't just like say why someone should be vegan. You have to first know whether they, like, say, have a basis for their ethics or anything.
Oh, I can tell you what my moral framework is. That would help you.
Yeah, that would.
I'm running off a utilitarian meme, and I'm convinced that eating animals generates more well-being than would be gained from letting an animal live out their existence.
How so?
How so? Well, I have a pig right now. I know that when I eat its flesh, I'm going to be deriving a lot of pleasure from that. So much so that I'm convinced it would be more than the pig would get from just existing. So as a utilitarian, I feel as though I'm justified in eating this pig.
Because it's so tasty. Wait, are you saying you're more like an egoist utilitarian?
I just go off my assumption of what is generating the most well-being.
For you?
For everyone.
Okay, it sounded like you were saying something
for
different.
Everything.
Okay.
So, more well-being is being produced from me eating this pig than letting him exist.
Okay, so you're saying, by killing him and eating him, you're getting more pleasure than the pig could have had for the rest of its life.
Exactly.
I see. Right. And but you said they were like on your own farm or something like that? You said they were on your own farm or something?
Yeah, I don't support factory farm.
Okay. Do you support any other farms?
Yeah, I raise hens. And I eat their eggs and kill them sometimes and eat them.
Right. Okay. So you actually believe that the marginal pleasure that you get from eating that pig is higher than the pleasure that pig could have had for its remaining life? Okay, well, like, what's another food that you like a vegan food?
Vegan food?
Yeah.
I'm eating tofu right now.
I doubt it.
No, I am.
Oh, really? But I doubt you like it that much unless it's properly seasoned, or like deep fried or something.
Oh yeah, it's mock chicken wings.
Oh yeah, sounds pretty good. The point was that, so that sounds pretty good. So it's not just the pleasure you get from eating the meat, it's actually the difference between what you're eating now and the meat. That's the pleasure calculation you have to run.
But seasoned tofu versus pork, there's no comparison. I just enjoy the actual meat way more. I derive so much more pleasure from it as opposed to a plant-based alternative.
So you can't just take the amount of pleasure you feel when you eat meat and say, oh, how does that compare to the pig? You have to look at what else could bring you that kind of pleasure and maybe let the pig be happy.
Why would I do that?
Okay, so imagine like the best mock meat that exists right now, right? How good is that on like a scale of -10 to 10?
Like 3.
Okay, and now imagine meat. How good is that?
10. 11.
Okay. Right, so there are 7 points difference between them. Right, so you have to say the pleasure the pig could have got is less than a 7. Anyway, even after making that adjustment, you still think you get more pleasure than the pig.
Yes.
Right. Okay. And how much pleasure would you say is possible for a pig to experience?
Anything from -10 to 2.
Okay. What would be the average for one of your pigs if it lived out the rest of its life?
I think a reasonable range would be like -2 to +2, I guess.
Right. So, it sounds like you're hardcore underestimating the value that pig gets. So I think
I don't know. I don't think the pig has really the cognitive capacity to experience pleasure to the extent that I can. And furthermore, I don't think pig lives an exceptionally pleasurable life.
maybe, but we could verify this with some brain scans to a fairly reasonable extent, I think. Okay, how long do you think the pleasure lasts that you get from eating the pig?
Maybe a week.
Right. And how long do you think the pig could live? I'm not quite sure, frankly, but I'm sure it's years. Do you have a good idea?
3 or 4 years.
And what's their lifespan?
But hang on, I don't think time is a very reliable metric in determining pleasure, right? Because you could derive a lot of pleasure in a very short period of time, and contrastly, you could experience a lot of suffering in a very long period of time. So I don't think it's a very reliable way for determining whether something is experiencing more or less pleasure, because it's very variable.
Wait, that doesn't seem to make sense to me. So you're not calculating pleasure at a given moment?
I don't think it should be predicated upon time. I don't know if that's what you were working towards, but
I'm just measuring it like watt hours. You have the rate of happiness and then the duration. We're just taking an average. So like when I turn on the heater, it takes 1200 watts and it turns on and off. So in an hour, it might burn, say, 400 watt hours. So the equivalent of 400 watts running constantly. So it goes up above that number and below that number, but for all practical purposes, you can say it uses X watt hours or kilowatt hours. Yeah, so if we can just figure out the average for the pig, we can just take that and apply it for any long period of time and just multiply those together to get happiness hours. Yeah, so I'm not seeing the objection here to incorporating time.
Again, you can have a lot of pleasure in a very short amount of time, and you can have a lot of suffering in a very long period of time. So it's very hard to.
But you're talking about. That's a really weird way of putting it. You said a lot of suffering in a short amount of time, or a lot of pleasure in a short amount of time. But it should be a lot of pleasure.
A lot of pleasure in a very short amount of time, and a lot of suffering in a very long period of time. So you could suffer your entire life and get a lot of pleasure in like a few seconds, and you would still get more pleasure in the few seconds, as opposed to somebody living out their entire life. So I don't think time is a very good or reliable metric of determining who is getting more pleasure.
I don't know where you're getting this time measure from. We're doing rate times time.
It's rate of pleasure per amount of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, you could have a lot of pleasure in a very small amount of time, or you could have a lot of negative pleasure in a very long period of time. So it's not a reliable metric of time.
What's not a reliable metric? I don't understand.
Just time itself. Sorry?
Why does it matter who gets more pleasure?
I'm running off of the utilitarian moral framework, so I always do what I feel is generating the most amount of well-being. In this circumstance, I would be generating more pleasure than the pig would be from existing.
Is there anything else that gives you the same amount of pleasure as eating the pig?
No.
Nothing in the world?
The majority of my pleasure is derived from animal-based foods. Did that clear my position?
Yeah, I guess.
So you have no moral objections then?
No, I do.
Oh, you do? So what are they?
Well, if the pig is still getting pleasure, then who are we to take that away from them?
Yes. So overall well-being is what I value. It doesn't matter to me if an ant is getting pleasure from his little ant friends, if me stepping on them would generate so much more pleasure than the absence of that action.
But it's
So,
only generated for you.
I think it's relative. I mean, if I do what generates the most amount of pleasure, I pick the options that generate the most amount of pleasure constantly. I'm a hedonist.
So you only care about your own pleasure.
No, not necessarily. Let's say somebody wanted my possessions, then yeah, I would definitely give them my stuff if that generates more well-being. So I always pick the options that generate the most amount of pleasure, and it's not necessarily just myself who's getting pleasure.
But how do you know how much pleasure other entities are receiving?
These are just assumptions. Always. We make assumptions about many things every day.
So, are you confident in your assumptions?
Totally. Just like you would make an assessment about the suffering or well-being of another animal. Say you pet a dog and you see him wagging his tail. Well, that's an intuition on your part. The same way that it would be an intuition on my part if I'm saying that I get more pleasure from eating animals and you would get pleasure from petting a dog.
But wouldn't the ants and the ants' family members or whatever be sad and suffer more and decrease their well-being a lot if we were to step on them?
I don't think ants possess the cognitive capacity to experience suffering on the same level that I could. So by me stepping on them, I would actually be generating more overall pleasure than if I didn't. So I definitely would take the option of stepping there.
I think.
But why can't you just find things that don't also cause suffering?
That don't mind.
Huh?
I said, why not find things that just don't also cause suffering? Find other things that give you pleasure.
Oh, well, we're talking about like in a vacuum here. There were two options. One in which there were ants that I stepped on, and one where there were ants that I did not step on. I would pick the former option, right, because it's generating more well-being.
Right.
I'd be generating more well-being by stepping on the ants than if I didn't. So
yeah. So I take that in the hypothetical dichotomy. Yeah, okay, you would do that, but I guess we're trying to get out of the hypothetical dichotomy realm and just start talking about like all the possible options.
Mm-hmm.
So like I feel probably if I killed you and then replaced you with a happier person, that I could increase utility and that happy person wouldn't have to hurt anyone. So it'd be a much better deal.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, if that person is generating more well-being in my place, then yes, absolutely, I would say do it. But I would definitely need some evidence for that.
That's why
because I wouldn't want to reduce the overall well-being.
Right, well, that's what I'm saying. So you're asking for evidence now. So
Oh, I
why shouldn't?
always ask for evidence. My entire framework is evidence-based.
Okay, if I tell you my intuitions, would you take that as evidence?
Your intuitions? Not all intuitions are evidence-based, but I definitely base my intuitions off evidence. So
Okay.
I would look at an ant and I would review the evidence of their cognitive capacity, right? Because well-being is predicated upon cognitive capacity,
Yeah.
brain,
Okay.
nervous system, everything. I would base all of this on the evidence available to me. And then I would make an assessment on whether or not to step on them in pursuit of overall well-being.
Right. Well, so if I were to provide you with some more evidence, might I be able to persuade you to change your mind?
Yeah, if you were to provide me with evidence that overall well-being would be reduced by me stepping on ants, then yes, I absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it depends on how many ants. I mean, I think ants are kind of an example where I might have to bite the bullet and just say, yeah, okay, if you step on a few ants, maybe you derive more pleasure from that. Of course, I'd still say you might be able to derive the same amount of pleasure, or almost the same amount of pleasure from something else. But I would just say, what about neuron count?
What about neuron count?
Yeah, do you think neuron count is a good predictor of sentience?
Well, I don't think sentience entails well-being. I don't know where you got that.
Wait, what?
I don't think the exhibition of sentience entails more well-being.
entail? I mean, like, obviously you can have a really big brain, but just be neutral all the time. That seems possible, but obviously the big brain is necessary for pleasure, right? And you think the big brain generally provides the capacity.
I don't know if brain is necessary for well-being.
Yeah, okay. I'll grant that there are other things that might be sufficient, but a brain is certainly sufficient for well-being.
As far as we know.
Yeah, I agree. That sounds correct. I mean, like, philosophers like Brian Tomasic think all sorts of things are capable of experience, pleasure and pain, even like computers and stuff. But yeah, obviously brains are, even if there are other things, brains are probably one of the best. I think we could probably get to evolution to sort of argue why things with brains probably experience pleasure and pain.
And again, like, I have a bigger brain than these ants.
Hold on, I shouldn't have said bigger, though. That was shorthand, because ant brains are more compact. So ants have about 100,000 neurons. Humans have, I believe it's 100 million. No, 100 million. Let me look this up. Yeah, I think it's 100 million, so it's a million-fold difference. Let me check this.
So, would you rather a majority be experiencing like the maximum capacity of pleasure than the majority of beings experiencing like pleasure but like not suffering? Do you know what I'm trying to say? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so you're talking about two possible worlds, one in which people have the capacity to experience pleasure and suffering, and one in which people are only experiencing pleasure.
Sure. Yeah.
If I could just like press a button and everyone would be incapable of suffering, then yeah, I definitely would.
So, would you be okay with going from -10 and +10 to -2 and +2 for everyone?
Well, I mean, you're decreasing by the same amount, so it wouldn't really matter. I would prefer that everyone would be experiencing +10 constantly, as opposed to anything less.
Yeah. So, how about this? What about the pain you're causing other people by eating meat? Like, I find it, especially for smart people, I feel like they should be vegan, and it bothers me when they're not. So I have some intuitions that are pretty strong and they can't really shake off. So it just seems kind of fucked up to like breed an animal and just control its entire existence. That just seems really fucked up to me. So I can't help but feel a little bit bothered when you do that.
So it's not really suffering so much as just like a personal distaste for like my actions. So you could express your own subjective opinion about this matter, but I think my pleasure that I'm getting would still outweigh your suffering from not liking the way I live.
Of course, you have to add these to the other things, but also give me pleasure if you went vegan. Especially after talking with you, I would feel very satisfied. So between those and the pleasure from the animal, I do think it's starting to add up. Do you agree that with it, if we add on a few more things, there might be enough evidence to go vegan?
Well, the thing is, the population of vegans is so infinitesimally small, like, what, 2% of the population? Most people don't agree with you. Most people
like
would support
now.
my...
Yeah, I think we're like 3% now. Or maybe a little, that study might be a little more by now, since that study was done, I think, a couple years ago.
Yeah. Okay, well, you're growing. But the point is, there are far more non-vegans than there are vegans, and most people would actually agree with my lifestyle, so they wouldn't be put off by it, at least to the extent that you would be. And Furthermore, I'm still convinced that the pleasure I derive from eating these animals outweighs the suffering that you would experience from me not being vegan.
Right. But you just think that my suffering isn't that great, right?
No, I'm just saying that your suffering doesn't outweigh the pleasure that I get.
Yeah. But obviously it can't be. Go ahead.
How do you know that?
Again, it's just an intuition. So it doesn't necessarily need to be any kind of empirical basis, but I always do base these intuitions off the best available evidence.
Okay, alright, so it sounds like maybe the only way to convince you would be to talk about factory farming.
We can talk about that. I don't support factory farming. I'm not convinced that it actually generates more well-being for the population. It's possible. I mean, people really enjoy eating meat. In every culture, pretty much, they do it and they really like it. But we are at least morally obligated to kill animals as fast as possible to minimize the amount of suffering that is caused. And we should also invest in ways to reduce suffering in plant agriculture.
Okay.
But I'm not opposed to eating or farming animals, because I think it generates more well-being than if they were left to live.
But how is it well-being? Like, I feel like well-being is different than pleasure.
They're used interchangeably. So it's like if you say you're increasing well-being, it could be that you were suffering a lot and now you're suffering a little. But if you say you're increasing pleasure, that usually means you're already happy. But yeah, in philosophical circles, I think they're usually considered more or less interchangeable.
Yeah, I think they're synonymous.
Yeah, so I think he's just using the word that way. So I think you just have to accept the way he's using it, unless you want to talk about something different than what he's talking about.
What about reducing suffering?
About what?
Reducing suffering.
Yeah, I think it should be minimized as much as possible. But not if it conflicts with well-being. If more well-being is generated by reducing suffering, then yeah, you should go with that option.
But why?
I just value well-being over
Are you
well-being.
destroying the well-being of the animal that you're killing?
Yeah, but the thing is, I'm producing more overall well-being. So I think you're looking at this from isolation. You're looking at this from one animal's perspective. But I think you need to look at the bigger picture. What is the entire universe?
But that pig,
I don't think
that pig gives me pleasure and you don't.
Sorry?
Like, that pig's existence gives me pleasure, whereas yours does not.
You can definitely say that. Again, though, I'm convinced that I'm experiencing more pleasure than the pig. So that's why my existence has more value than the pig's.
Okay. You think you don't contribute at all in any way to factory farming?
Not like the mainstream animal agriculture industry. I live on a farm, so
right.
I raise my own animals.
Is it possible that you contribute to the culture in such a way that factory farming is higher than it would be if you didn't?
I think we all contribute to animal agriculture to some extent. I mean, if you pay taxes, you're already supporting these industries, so...
Right. But
I'm not sure I understand your question.
I said culture, so your cultural impact, not like your financial impact.
Cultural impact. Can you elaborate?
So it's like if you're eating meat that's normalized, so people go like, I'm gonna go get a burger at McDonald's.
Yeah, that's an objection some vegans give to like wearing animal clothes like a leather jacket, for instance. Like even if it's secondhand or if you had bought it before you were vegan, they'd still say, yeah, don't wear it because average people, they're just going to look at that and say, hey, that looks nice, I'm going to go buy a leather jacket. So you'd be supporting culturally animal deaths, exploitation.
Or even just posting a picture of some fake chicken wings, but pretending like they're real chicken wings, and then inspiring some meat eaters to go eat some more chicken wings.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I ever said that factory farming reduces overall well-being. I just said I wasn't convinced that it increases overall well-being.
Well, we might have to go there. You said pigs could experience -10, right?
Yeah. I'd say my best guess, based on the evidence, pigs can experience -2 points of suffering and +2 points of well-being.
Oh,
Anywhere in that range is reasonable.
Okay, was that the one?
So he changed it.
He might have changed it earlier. When did you change that, or are you changing it now?
Earlier, he said -10 to +2, and then he said for his specifically, it's probably more like -2 to +2.
Yeah, if we're talking just about factory farming though, I think that, they'd definitely be experiencing negative well-being, maybe suffering, right? So,
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, so my guess, probably like an 8 or 9 on the suffering from the videos I've seen.
-8 or -9?
Probably, probably -8, I think.
Yeah, okay. That sounds about right, because you're suffering quite a lot, but it could be suffering more. But, not much. It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So, if you are contributing to that, you think it's pretty bad.
In isolation and from the pig's perspective. But again,
wait,
look at the bigger picture.
Why do you talk about...
What are the people who are eating the animals experiencing, right?
So, the pleasure the person gets is not going to be that great.
You could argue from a health perspective that they're suffering.
Also where I was going to go to. See, we have to get to each of these individual things so we can talk about the pleasure they derive from eating it, the well-being lost from the medical complications. We have to go through each of these things point by point, and then you can make your overall evaluation. Like, you keep going back to the net. I'm like, oh, what about this? It's bad. And you're like, oh yeah, but on net.
I'm definitely taking health into consideration here when talking about well-being, so I still don't see how it would lower overall well-being.
Do you think it improves human well-being overall?
I'm not convinced either way.
Okay, hold on. So you're uncertain about the well-being impacts on humans, but you're fairly certain about the well-being impacts on the animals.
I'm just not convinced that the negative health outcomes outweigh the pleasure people would be getting.
So you're uncertain, positive or negative?
Yes.
Okay. And for the pig, you're pretty certain. It's very negative.
Yep.
Okay. So you're comparing a fairly certain negative to a non-certain positive or negative. How do you get to the conclusion that you're pretty uncertain about which way it goes? It seems like the certainty side should take priority.
Yeah, if I'm more certain about the negative than I will about the positive, I guess it would make more sense to affirm the negative that it's actually producing that utility. So yeah, I'll concede that. So I'd say factory farming produces overall well-being based on the evidence that I have available to me.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. Cool. Yeah. So I think we got somewhere. That's a fairly significant admission. So you agree then that if you support it, directly or indirectly, you are probably increasing net suffering?
I would say you're reducing net well-being.
Yeah.
I don't really think there's such a thing as net suffering.
Right. Okay. So then one would just have to make the case that you are contributing. Yeah?
Culturally?
Yeah, that's where it was. But in any case, whether you contribute or not, there's also the function of maybe you should be preventing it. Because if you can help people not eat factory farmed meat, then that's something you should do. So even if you don't support it, you could be against it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess to be consistent, I would actually have to completely disconnect myself from society or advocate against factory farming.
Well, I think I disagree with that first part. I think from a utilitarian view, disconnecting from society is only getting a neutral impact on society, whereas you should be aiming for...
I think you could raise overall well-being more if you were socializing with other people.
Yes, I agree.
So I guess to be consistent, I'd be against eating animals. Maybe not necessarily exceptions like roadkill and whatnot.
Yeah, well, by the way, roadkill is vegan. Most vegans, like, if you do a poll, you can say who thinks that roadkill is vegan. I would say between 60 to like 95% would probably say yes. Anyway.
Okay, so I'll be a vegetarian for now.
All right, cool. Yeah, that was really good. I mean, I think I learned a lot from that discussion. If I'm talking to an honest non-vegan who's utilitarian, I think that might be a functional line of reasoning. I'm glad we had that talk.
Yeah, same here.
All right.